Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode, which is titled A Thousand Tears. For a world that was never here. This episode, sometimes I'm playful with the episode. Sometimes my intention and attention with the whole talk is towards the future. Sometimes it's towards the past. And to be honest, we as human beings, from wherever we are, that's where the world is beginning. And so my mind has playfully wondered about how the future will approach us. You see, I have a relationship with thought personally that when I was younger, I felt I had thoughts. I thought they were all my thoughts came from me. But then there came a moment where I realized sometimes thoughts visit me. And in some sense, I started treating the mind like an antenna. And I wondered about what was being received. And I noticed what was being received, like the imagery of it, what the unconscious communicated was not as much as interesting as how the unconscious communicated. And so many people who wonder about the unknown, they are introduced to metaphysics, and if they are not mindful, in some sense, if their mind is full of themselves, an ego will try to conquer. I want to share a chapter of my science fiction novel. It's unpublished yet, but I will tell you, this is a chapter I've never shared, and it's a story about, if I remember correctly, the main character's name is Rasoul. It's in the year 5000. The story, the film, the science fiction story begins in the year 5025. And the main character goes into this park, and I kind of saw New York Central Square, or the park, Central Park, or whichever it is. And that the whole of Wall Street has become the holiest place in the year 5025. Still, the world is the architecture of the world. I kept it similar so it becomes relatable. Anyways, the main character, he feels it is his time to leave his individual existence and enter his collective form. In other words, dissolve out of this reality. He goes into the park and sits on a sits on a rock in the middle of a river. And he closes his eyes, and for a second he's ready. I remember how I wrote it. I wrote that the character was ready to enter the Pure Lands, but eventually a memory visits him. A memory of his father, and the main character's father is named Bismillah, and Bismila. And Bismillah looks at Rasul in the dream, and I must say it again. He gets pulled back into the dream. The dream takes him to a year, and it's a year where there had been laws passed that made cars no longer automated. In this novel I've written, the characters live many years. They live like thousands of years, the human beings. And human beings are kind of like in an enlightened phase of reality where, of course, in the year 5025, they are like the angels of robots who are living like humans. So it's as if imagine us creating robots and we evolving beyond our kind of world, not beyond our physical form, but beyond our world, and we kind of looking at robots from a veil that they cannot see us, something like that. In the dream, Rasul's father is coming to pick him up from school, and he comes and picks him up from school. and Rasul is kind of waiting. And the cars don't have windshields. It's like an old car, but it's like instead of a windshield, it has these light things that from the inside anything can go out, but from the outside nothing can come in. These beams of kind of like light windshields. Rasul comes into the car. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but his father asked him how was the day. And in this story, this is the reason I'm sharing this. This is where I want to take this talk. Where in the story, Rasul says it was the first day in their school where a new AI robot child was introduced to the school with an unknown kind of AI. And this robotic kid who was in class got bullied, and pretty much the kids with trash cans, like trash can lids or something, like they just kind of hit this robot. The kids didn't treat the robot like a human. You see, that is the reason the reason why, at least in many societies around the world, there's this notion that schools are hostile places for certain personalities. It's simply because the people in power tend to see themselves first, then others. You see, this is the challenge of civility. To be able to see the other as within as much valued position as yourself. Now, anyways, so what happens is Rasul comes in the car, and Rasul became friends with the robot, and the robot's name was Mekena, Machenna, McKenna. And so the whole thing is that this robot's come here, and Rasul is telling his father that in the break time, where there's a break like between their school periods and whatnot, imagine traditional kind of school. What's going on? What's going on is that this kid that's a robot, is running into the yard of the school trying to find psychedelic mushrooms, you know, and. Of course, it's a very, it's a strange thing, but I took influence from various cultural things I saw, throughout my life, various things I've seen. And so the thing is, this kid, this robot kid, Rasul is telling his father, Bismillah, that in some sense, like this kid was trying to find psychedelic mushrooms to see that if he can be a human, if he can experience a state of mind. Imagine a robot being conscious of a robot. You see, we are individually conscious beings when we are aware of our limitations. Any person who is not aware of their limitations, subjectively, they feel limitless, probably. You know. So, anyways, in this novel, of course, I'm giving a suggestion of a certain idea. But at the same time, I'm trying to say that we cannot avoid the various dimensions, just like how new kids enter the school, new technologies are entering our civilization, and we must no longer just study the relationship of man with nature, but man with the unnatural. And in some sense, incorporating and bringing about the unnatural. Let us say, like this was thought, like forget the story now, I'm going to put a pause there on the story. Okay, I'll give you a sum up, and then I'll end with the story. Pretty much, that kid ends up growing and becoming a kind of tribal leader for the robotic society and the robotic realm in the sci-fi novel. So, anyways, that guy becomes a friend. That robotic kid eventually becomes Rasul's friend at some point, and it helps him out in the future. But anyways. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to find something. I find that what technology is going to do is it's going to conquer the attention of the human being, and wherever the attention of the human being is, immediate definitions arise from it. So I want to give this example for you. Imagine somebody who goes to this garden and picks up the greatest flowers, the most beautiful flowers, the most beautiful works of art of nature, and that person holds this incredible collection of various dimensions of beauty and vision and design, and he's holding them, these flowers in his hand. But imagine now that person goes and sits by a dumpster. Imagine that person goes and sits by a non-pleasant place, a non-pleasant environment. The non-pleasant environment, it doesn't matter what you hold, still the environment's voice comes into the definitions of your psychology. This is the most crucial thing that we as human beings must realize. Our environment is a part of our thinking. And trust me, if your environment becomes, there's two ways man can become intelligent. Either his sense of self updates or the world updates. Now, the sense of self updates in accordance to free will. So it's kind of like if you have the energy and motivation, run towards the world that is waiting to be known. That's awaiting to be known. But when it's the world, the free will of individuals must contribute to a system that can become conscious of itself. The issue is the lack of self-awareness in the design of many institutions that are governing reality. It's not that they are wrong, it's not that they are right, it's just that the self-awareness is limited, because what it is eventually we are like, rather than being one complete mirror, nature started as one complete mirror, but then this mirror broke and it shattered into many pieces. Now if the pieces choose, they will become an influence upon the world. They will become greater reflections of the cultural value of where society and civilization is going. What that means is there will come a moment where you will become the superhero of your inner universe. And when you are the superhero of your inner universe, what that means is you have confronted chaos in order to be, to a degree that is like you have awareness, yourself is maintained in a sort of order. When I say this order, it doesn't mean it's a specific order. It doesn't mean truth is one pattern that has to be copy pasted in every person's mind. You know, language is not our owner. We own language, you know. And what I mean by that, it's not actually something to own. It's a technology being used. Language is the Iron Man suit if the mind was Tony Stark, you know. You know, we got to put in Avengers references for the youth, you know. The world should care. The world should care for how the mind develops, and that's what I realized. We got to start thinking of our minds as fields of intelligence rather than boxes of kind of jello, you know. Okay, I'm getting a bit silly, but what I'm saying is that in some sense we're more than just neurons running about, you know, due to chemical reactions. There's many ways the world can be described. Like when somebody communicates, I find even when you look at a sentence, it's a sequencing of conception. Now the question is, we human beings, we are not in any lack. Like if you go and try to attempt a sort of professional approach at the entertainment industry, you see ideas are everywhere, you know? Everybody has ideas, do you see? But what is more valuable than just having an idea? It is an idea so important that if the person does not act upon it, it's as if their self will not grow. That is the thing. That is the biggest thing with fear. That means it's much better to confront the fear instantaneously than to years later wonder what would have been. You have to project strength. We are bringing up a generations of children who are just being defensive. You know, because they're being defenses, they have to be judgmental. You have to judge the situation to be able to defend yourself. You know, that means defending is kind of like your mind is attacking the environment before your body. Your mind is kind of being faster than the movements of the environment. you know. From one angle, we must take responsibility for our whole moment. And from another angle, our whole moment is everything that we're aware of. That means, in some sense, we are. Actually, I didn't check how loud my voice is. Oh my God. Nobody's hearing anything, I think. Okay. Sorry, guys, if my voice was too low. Sometimes when I speak, I move away from the computer. I gotta invest in some Apple headphones, you know. I'm using Samsung headphones on an Apple product, you know. There's definitely some issues there, but I guess I think I've built enough of a context to approach the title. 1,000 tears for a world that was never here. What that means is that's another way of saying a conscious being staring into the unconscious void, kind of how Friedrich Nietzsche said, once you stare at the abyss long enough, it stares back into you. And what that means is where your attention goes, it's searching for definitions. And pretty much how you wield your attention has to do with how much you want to take and how much you want to let go. You know, when you're not comfortable with the self, with your sense of, with your moment of being, with just being alone, you have to, in some sense, the mind has to look for something. And this is why when they defined in ancient texts let's say the evolutionary human animal, it was a bewildered beast of nature. That means we did not open our eyes in chaotic, in an ordered way that now we should expect everything's going to be perfect. There's going to be world peace. There's going to be like an efficiency of global integration and efficient vision. It's like we started as animals, savages, violent chaos. And if there's something as the DNA kind of echoing from the ancient times, you know, kind of as if your DNA, your body is the embodiment of history. You know, I find that is the true meaning of DNA. That many worlds live within you as you live within many worlds. This is why to honor your moment must come from the unknown. The unknown must approach you, and the unknown is nothing to be fantasized. That means the issue is like, check this out. The spirit. I think the typical spiritual seeker gets certain experiences. They realize there's something more. They don't know what it is, but they follow it. You know, and as Carl Jung kind of explained, some people sometimes find synchronicities. What does that mean? That means the world of the storyline behind your eyes suddenly, and the storyline in front of your eyes, if they deviate. So what does that mean? That means if I think I'm like I'm a spiritual being, and at the same time I think I'm just this physical being, do you know? And one day in physical reality, something, you know, unique happens. You know, imagine something like miraculous happens. There is a coincidence. It's as if the mind's narrative is greater than the body's physical existence throughout history. So you see, the mind is in some sense not a dimension to worship. Anything you worship will worship egotistically will lead to worships, because if it's about being right, and the mind is under the impression that it has to prove to the external world what the internal world is. And when that's the assumption, anger comes very easily. You get angry very easily. Anytime you get pushed, you feel it's as if, what was it? It's like the wrath of 10,000 suns are kind of at your fingertip. Like it's one of those things where you have to realize, is it worth it? That means, just like a businessman, just like an entrepreneur, they have to think about the short term and the long term. And religion, I find its attraction is that it has given an image to the long term. And because man currently goes and it's like, oh my God, I don't know what happens like thousands of years from now on, that image becomes too mysterious to be a response. As if, why did a book talk about the end of the world? Do you know? And it's not that we are looking for validity. We have to look for efficiency. It is survival of the most efficient, not survival of the most, correct. The most self-corrected. So think of it this way: evolution, survival of the fittest. The evolution of matter into conscious thought. That is where we're standing. We're standing as conscious beings in a moment of existence, and this biological kind of, our body is like projecting through first receiving the world what the world is. So what it is kind of finding as if you have an invisible extended self, but this invisible extended self is not a self of shape, it is a self of space. So what it is pretty much, it's non-conceptual, and that's why I realized this was the whole, it's like a lot of time was being wasted in history by many spiritual societies, I consider personally, mystical societies, mystic traditions, because they didn't know how to acknowledge the language threshold. Nobody thought of coming up with a word. They just said it in riddles the whole time. It's like nobody came up with the word. Okay, language threshold. Literally, the experience cannot be contained in language, mainly because either the words do not exist for it or the thought has never been seen. That means many things that we now use arose like, look around you. Just if you're in a room, look around you. If you're outside, look around you. Tell me, what do you see that in some sense, it's like a lot of everything, every product was an idea in the mind of a person. You see, it's as if the world does give medals to some, but every being who is in some sense has an endless effort is how can I tell you? There's many champions of the world behind, in the not in the shadows, but that they are champions of the moment. They are not champions of culture. They're not an image. They are present, very able present beings, right? So it's kind of like we have to either function as the observer or the objects and subjects of observance. The objects of observance, the moment you look at it, it is what it is. What can you say about an object? Like, seriously, the Buddha was even like, yo guys, the objects are empty. And people were like, what do you mean they're empty? And Buddha was, just look at an object. It's like the object has no story, nothing, no definition. By our sight falling upon it, there is evoked upon the agreed upon symbol is evoked. You know. So we are creatures of no longer objective physical fittest survival evolution. We are creatures now that must attend to the subjective significance. And the subjective significance of this human story is that, why is the attention there? Do you know there are moments of chaos I have literally entered literally in this life? There's been certain intense moments, very as if kind of like the world shouted at me, be humble, you know, and like shouted. And I was like, okay, but it still kept shouting, kept shouting, kept shouting until I realized I was not fully in the moment because my past was still creating value for me. The past is past. That's the easiest way to handle it. Whatever you've gone through, you've gone through. So what? You know? It's literally just movement, you know? But the significance of how that movement means something to you, how we measure or give a value to human life, that is no longer a solo road. That means I have no idea what spiritual seekers around the world are doing, that they are just, how can I tell you? It's like on some level, there is a hedonistic undertone to every action. I don't know how to say it, but it's as if like the thought is arising as a self and the self is relating, considering how separate it is from the world. There's a story of this warlord. This warlord goes to the sage. Or let me say it like this. This warlord decides to kill all the monks. He gets to a town. His general comes up to him. He's like, this one monk is too old and everybody in the army is younger than him. And he's just peacefully sitting there so nobody's killed him. And the warlord is angry. It's like, what? You know, you guys are not listening to my orders. I'm going to kill all of you. the warlord, the warlord, filled with rage, anger, gripping the handle of his sword as if he can't wait to use it. And he goes to the where the monk is, and he shouts at the monk, old monk. The monk is this peaceful old monk, and all the younger monks from the monasteries had run away because this warlord was killing all the monks. So this one monk has stayed, and this one monk just stares and stands up, listens to the warlord, and stands up, and is just fearlessly like there's this stare he has that the warlord doesn't know what to make of it, you know. And the warlord continues. His ego still continues his story. The ego has not realized what kind of being it's in front of, you know. The warlord shouts like a raging shout, as if a bull's horns are about to, you know, run towards its target. The warlord says, "Do you know who I am? I can have my sword in your stomach in an instant." He says this savagely. It's a tense moment, you know? The whole entourage, army, crew, whatever, of the warlord are just watching. The monk says, "Do you know who I am?" And he just smiles. And he says, "I can have your sword in my stomach in an instant." And he stands his ground. He stands with his truth. And the warlord is like, literally realizes the ego only fights because it feel it can beat the other ego. But when a person comes that has no ego, then the ego cannot literally extract value. It cannot conquer what it knows unconquerable, you know. The thing is that a lot of our motivations, if we were eternal beings, you know, there's this argument that we would not do anything. That means what space is could be evolved civilizations that reached a sort of eternal value where they never needed to do anything, and kind of they got forgotten by manifestation and became space. You know, of course, entertain these ideas playfully, but I remember something that motivated me in 2014 to give these talks, and it was actually kind of like, I don't know how to say it. It was this future thing that I kind of knew would happen, but I didn't touch. It was as if like a subtle prediction that I didn't care too much about. And in some sense, there came a day where there was this vision. Now, when I say vision, is when that's how you know like an image is not coming from you, because it shocks you. You know, it's not familiar to you. The unfamiliar can be said to be the unknown in some sense. And so what the vision was it was as if I was watching it as like a camera view. I was like space watching, you know. And what it was this kind of beam, this strange kind of like shockwave kind of like beam, you know, kind of coming down. And the moment it came down to like between like certain, I don't know what kind of, like there were certain structures, like it was, imagine like it was a city and it came down to the street of a city. And when it came down, it turned into wind. I don't know how to tell you. It turned into beams of kind of like wind like light. I don't know how to say. And pretty much that beam of light that came from that point of that like shockwave point, it was suddenly as if I kind of noticed it was like the higher speeds of intelligence are not attained through just the ability to visualize. They are attained with a rhythmic abidance. With it's as if like the movie's conclusion, it was the last scene of the film. How does the world turn our eyes? What is the value of human vision? It's as if you only live for selfhood, you only live for the internal reality, your inner world, it will feel empty. It's as if you will feel you're missing out. And if you only live in an objective where you just live as an animal, you feel you miss out. You know, and that feeling of miss out comes from a kind of your whole moment of being. That means we are the human being's value is based on how the value is generated, how it arises in the moment. Where does hope lead a temporary being? to the last breath's effort of another option. Our freedom is a reaction to it's the lack of freedom we have, our sense of freedom as a species. Our sense of suffering is based on the design of the universe. That means it's like when you feel you suffer, you feel as if the world was designed wrong, or it's as if you are looking at it wrong. There have been times it's as if I find wisdom is just conscious piloting of attention. That's what it is. That you are the presence of the universal sector, which has appeared as an animate creature. When you start from zero, the world is like a miracle. But when you start from infinity, zero is just change. The mind has a hidden dance. That means I want you to think that only a very tiny percentage of your intelligence as a being is visible to you. And what does that mean? That means there are not just external mountains, outer mountains to climb, but there are also inner mountains to climb. These inner mountains to climb, people have taken advantage of the unknown. I am telling you, it's like, it's kind of messed up. It's as if like on some level, yeah, our ancestors were savage people. But this savageness became more and more tamed to a point now that it has reached the stability, the mind is going over what the journey it went. That means the mind again is starting from like a sort of savageness and requiring to be brought into order. It's kind of like treating your energetic existence as if it was your child. This may sound strange, but listen to this idea. As if it's a being you give complete freedom, yet because you care, you are acting as a shield in the wind of life for them. So what that means is you recognize your energetic existence. A thought cannot own energy. Energy just makes thought appear. Let's have a slow hand clap for the energy of the cosmos, guys. It's a lot of hard-working particles out there. Yeah. I found that if I choose to entertain myself in civilization as a character in a story, now just hear me out on this. As a character in a story, that character will be hurt by everything, not hurt, but changed by everything it sees. What I mean by that is that you are choosing how your mind contains your experiences. And that choice is the freedom of will. Just like that saying where they say, where there's a will, there's a way. I find we have to re-embrace the unknown in our educational system and treat the minds of the future generations as explorers. Explorers that their rewards are collective advancement. That means it's as if the world wants to buy a certain product. We just we'll be like, okay, okay, world obsessed about the next product. What if this next product was the value that you in your lifetime you were able to see humanity's advancement? And let me tell you, humanity's advancement on some level, you got to be graceful with it. That means you shouldn't impose. But on another level, it's as if because you are here once, the actions must occur. I remember like when I was really young, like I think I was 6 or something, 6, 7, and I was in
what do you call it? I was in Iran, where I was born, and Tehran, and Tehran. But how can I tell you? It's like when I was young in the car, I would look out the window and I would see kind of like the fences on the curb of, let's say, the highway. And what it was is I would visualize, for example, kind of this cartoon like ninja I had drawn running there on those rails, like kind of imagine running at the same speed of the car on those rails. My mind was projecting in that moment a sort of, in one moment it took a certain design and it projected the design upon the moment. Like that is what imagination is, by the way. It is how from the nations of image behind your eyes, in all the ways the world has been classified, as experience occurs, it's as if the unknown gives you the command and you then command. But the unknown is not, this is the thing, we are story hungry when it comes to the unknown. And that's why only the content get to see the content of the world, you know. I'm trying to think, like I have this thing, I just discovered this, that it was I mean for myself, that it was any moment where I see myself in a certain way, I can also see from that certain way its opposite. That means there have been moments where I've been in an external chaotic situation and I've suddenly seen the internal order of things, of the constitution of the moment. And there's been times where internally it was chaotic and I just suddenly saw it like external beauty. I don't know how to tell you. Sometimes beauty is not an image. It is, as the yogi said, a not, they didn't say rhythmic. I'm adding the rhythmic part, but they said it's an abidance. It's an abidance through the silence where the cosmos, where the voice of the cosmos was born out of. That means it's as if, just like all voices, my voice has stepped out of silence and it will return to it. This is the nature of life. It's not just one image. You can't just have your belief system must have dynamic intentions. It must envision. That means vision is a value. It's like clay given to you, and kind of how, like Michelangelo says, the sculptor, he says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. You know, it's I was always fascinated by these people in history, who were called polymaths, you know, because I was like, okay, how's this guy doing this? It was like a sort of um, puzzle for me. It was puzzling me how one being could have ability in various dimensions at the same time. So it was like there's something called multitasking, and there's something called, let's call it, at first okay, a multi expression of existence. Okay, just like your attention can leap from task to task at a kind of efficient pace, it becomes where the attention, instead of leaping from world to world, sees all worlds at once, kind of like the vision of the eagle as it flies in the sky, staring at the whole forest, as if the eagle is the king of the sky, as we say the lion is the king of, what do you call it, the ground. And so the thing is, but the lion is a greater king than the eagle, because the lion has to confront opponents. It has to literally challenge design. You know, that's kind of what living is. You wake up, you're a design and a design, and you march. And believe it or not, our biological design defines our psychology. The fact that we have legs, we build roads. The fact that we have hair, we build combs. You see, it's nature's relationship. So what it is it's kind of like the mind reaches a level of contentment where it doesn't react to the appearance of an image. It's like before you can trust the unknown must trust you. And when the unknown doesn't trust you, what it feels like is kind of like falling from the clouds of a heaven that you helped build. Because the behavior of man is key, the key to the door of this character and then the story, you know. If we thought only in an elemental level, what is the purpose of an element in space? It will forever be unknown. That means it doesn't matter if we somehow build time machines and go back to time to see how it all began. If I had a time machine, I would go to the first moment of existence. And I kind of noticed it would be a loop, because if I'm in the first moment where if like imagine if I had a time machine and kind of I went back to the source of I set the date to the earliest date possible on the machine, you know. I would reach a point of non-existence where I would be the existence. This is a kind of one of those Mr. Within theories where if we went truly back in time, we would be the creator of time. We would be the witness in the first moment. I found that the moment I kind of heard Elon Musk say that there's 1 billionth of a chance that kind of we're in a simulation. I kind of noticed that the same thing can be applied to anything. That means man truly transcends, the moment truly transcends when it is no longer fragmented. That means you have found a sort of ability to acknowledge the singular and also the multidimensional. And because you're certain of the singular, you notice how the singular is creating the multidimensional, and what it is remembering various attempts of its expression. It's kind of like how the edge of conception is always now. I find we have been given too many answers as a civilization. We have worshipped data for too long. So then? What is the next step if there was such a path? It would have to do with revaluing the most or re-envisioning the most important value. What it means is, imagine a house is on fire. Okay, imagine a house is on fire, and the person sees this, and the person, like the fireman, let's say, has to run in the house and make important critical decisions. For me, firemen are like just their minds. Like I don't care about personalities. I'm just saying, just the ability of a mind to go into chaos and in some sense pave a path of order is incredible. Medieval societies had the concept of knighthood. And the knighthood was a sort of human being that was on the level of the samurai, because they were being defined by internal values and narratives. Something that was kind of uncommon. You see, when you acknowledge who you truly are, then the world starts, in some sense, the generators of the world start kind of building your true life for you. Do you know? We have to consider waves of data are hitting us all the time. We are being bombarded by so much various views of phenomena that, in some sense, even if you didn't have access to data, like the written data, for example, any book or nothing, you had no access. Imagine you were, let's say, a child born in a world, you would still have enough experiences and, in some sense, to be able to adopt certain patterns of language. And patterns of language, the divine thing about language is that it's a bridge between the inner realities. The dualistic mind has to create a hierarchy or it will have no purpose. That means pretty much objective reality is just an attempt at an attempt at an how would I say it, like an infinitude of the subjective position. Pretty much it's a scared creature that doesn't know what else to do but then continue. So you choose how you walk, you also choose how the mind has access to the moment, or is how activated it is to the moment. You know, behind your eyes, there the mind. That's you can say the pure lens of the mind, the freedom you find in the pure lens behind your eyes. When I say pure lens, many people don't value honesty, but if you don't have honesty, you can't even imagine like a scientist not being honest about the scientific experiment. It's as if there was no point of doing the experiment. So it's as if the honesty is so crucial because it means there's the tension is moving with trust. That means you either trust the moment and then you move, or you don't trust the moment. And because so many different kinds of moments approach us, it's as if, like, okay, just start with trusting the moment, you know and eventually life becomes like a moment where you're staring out of a kind of for the mind, I'm saying, in a subjective way, becomes kind of like you're staring out as outside of an airplane window, and you're seeing the worlds you're crossing. This is why in a lot of mystical hymns there is a reminiscence. It's like as if the poor souls have realized where they came from, and so now they're freaking out and writing, uh, you know, sad but enlightening love poems for the cosmos. It's as if this was what happened. The archetype of the world after the archetype of God came into view. There was the archetype of God's personality that was being questioned, and certain what do you call it, poets, they reached a certain level through their honest vision, you know, that they reached. When they reached that level, it's as if they were willing to personify the ultimate. It's as if a level of trust that it's only internal assurance. So you can only be certain internally. That means on some level you're piloting your moment of being and your plane of existence. And so the greatest way, the most responsible way to pilot is to navigate is the whole plane of existence. That means to consider the whole content of the moment. And in order to consider the whole content of the moment, what that means is, imagine it's like a singular point and then having a 360 view, the whole 360, not just a segmented angle, something. And that whole 360 is only, it's not, you cannot be a personality. You cannot be a sort of pattern, a temporary pattern, and discover it that way. So what that means is, hilariously and coincidentally, the unknown is also the end of the known. Sorry, the eternal. Oh man, the image. I gotta erase the whiteboard here. I find that our ancestors, at least some of our ancestors, they wielded shields and swords throughout the day. And I find that what it means is there was a acceptance of a sort of mindset where in one way you look at the world and you defend yourself from it, and one way you look at the world and you charge at it, right? So these two modes, one kind of the offensive and defensive kind of psychological personalities, the archetypes that kind of lead to those behaviors. It's like you can't find freedom if behind your eyes that freedom is not being acknowledged. And that freedom, oftentimes, when one feels they have entered an inefficient pattern, that's what a mistake is. What you do is you just stare at the design, you just watch it. It's like life is, to be honest, something to be watched. And as it is being watched, there are certain moments where there's inspiration for action. So the thing is, the issue is not. I find they say like there's this ridiculous statistic, and it's hilarious, guys. There's this statistic that says, let me tell you why I say that. Like there's this statistic that says a lot of people. Okay, let me just search it. Okay, so I just searched for it, and there's okay, check this out. So these are quotes from the American Psychological Association. Of course, I'm in Canada right now speaking, but I find these facts may apply. Canada is kind of like acting as the younger brother of America, Um, the American Psychological Association says, it's on this website called GoStress.com. It says the Stress in America survey results show that adults continue to report high levels of stress, and many report that their stress has increased over the past year. It goes on to say 75% of adults reported experiencing moderate to high levels of stress in the past month, and nearly half reported that their stress has increased in the past year. Approximately 1 out of 75 people may experience panic disorder. Stress is a top health concern for U.S. teens between 9th and 12th grade. Psychologists say that if they don't learn healthy ways to manage that stress now, it could have serious long-term health implications. 80% of workers feel stress on the job, and nearly half say they need help in learning how to manage stress, and 42% say their co-workers need such help. Stress levels in the workplace are rising, with 6 in 10 workers in major global economies experiencing increased workplace stress, with China 86% having the highest rise in workplace stress, as this was said by the Regus Group. And there was one that I read, approximately 1 out of 75 people may experience panic disorder. That's from National Institutes of Mental Health. These are quotes. Alarmingly, 91% of adult Australians feel stress in at least one important area of their lives. Almost 50% feel very stressed about one part of their life. Australian employees are absent for an average of 3.2 working days each year through stress. This workplace stress costs the Australian economy approximately 14.2 billion. Medibank said this. An estimated 442,000 individuals in Britain who worked in 2007 to 8 believed that they were experiencing work-related stress at a level that was making them ill. Labor Force survey. Approximately 13.7 million working days are lost each year in the UK as a result of work-related illness at a cost of 28.3 billion per year. National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence. Depression is among the leading cause of disability worldwide, World Health Organization. Fewer than 25% of those with depression worldwide have access to effective treatments, World Health Organization. Okay, so all these quotes that I just read from the site, guys, that of course I'm just reading something on this website, but I find that they seem to be reliable. Anyways, What this means is, this is the reason I said it's hilarious, is because this means the whole system is inefficiently designed. That means we're literally living in a machine and wondering why we're stressed. Do you know we're living in an engine where the personal being is separated? Do you see? It's as if, when do you work the best? You know, when the being has enough comfort, you know? And so that means genius requires its own time, its own pace. So what that means is that the system, what it means is work is must move like, oh man, how should I say this? The system is inefficiently designed, and because it's inefficiently designed, any new attempt of efficiency in it is guess what? The world is inefficient in that moment, in that system. So what it means is, what is the point of that system? That human beings are giving attention to it. Anything that attention finds, it lives on. It becomes eternal. That means, imagine there was a bunch of pictures and somebody showed you only one of them, and you went on living your whole life with that one picture being in your memory, you know, and you wonder what were those other pictures. Do you see? So it's kind of like um, a sort of wonder that's very important, an unknown wonder. And that unknown wonder comes from realizing that there's a value to independence in that it gives internal freedom. That means the relationship that man has with the cosmos is the relationship man has with his mind. The relationship man has with his mind is the relationship man has with his body. The relationship man has with his body is the relationship man has with his world. The relationship man has with his world is the relationship he has with himself. The relationship man has with himself is the relationship man has with the whole moment now. This moment. How this moment is the commander of any memory that will come to it. It's kind of like this thing, the difference between the psychology back in the day of a prince and the psychology of a, like, the child of a peasant. One was given external freedom, the other wasn't. You know, but both had internal freedom. This is why Buddha was actually the son of an emperor, you know, and he was kind of kept in a simulation. You know, his childhood was an illusion, you know, and when he stepped out of the palace one day, he realized, oh my God, there's a way I can step out. It's as if his parents had kept him in the house, you know. Okay, guys, sorry about that. Needed an intermission there. Pretty much, like, after reading those facts, like, I kind of had a sense, like, of that kind of situation. And the thing is that a civilization must become an efficient story. And it must become an efficient story that children can get access to. So you see, it's like some people search for data. So they just want to know about the world. And there are some people who want to know about themselves. And those people who want to know about themselves actually more authentically pay attention to the world than those people who just want to pay attention to what's in the world. You know, they allow their mind to expand as their externality does as well. Their internal dimensions kind of fly. Your internal and external dimensions are kind of like the wings of a bird that must be used at the same time for efficient flight. You know, and so when I say the pilot of consciousness must navigate as the whole plane of existence, I'm literally saying, like, you are a moment of intelligence, the whole moment. You're a moment of intelligence, and this moment of intelligence is being directed and navigated in accordance to attention. And what attention is an energetic opportunity for design to be made advanced. So what it is more than people have thoughts, is that they're looking at their world in different ways, and somehow various instances and those memories are coagulating into new character, into new waves of characterhood. Regardless of what gift is given, your mind interprets the expression. Your hands take the vision of the moment. 1,000 years for a world that was never here. You can say it is the idea that the definition of extinction, um, if considered to be humanity is on a ship, and on this ship, some people have stopped caring. They're like, we're gonna drown anyways. Why try to do something about it? And there are some people who are like, okay, that seems too easy. Let's wonder about the complex a little, you know. And some people, like, how can I say it? They confront rather than running away from the chaos. They stare into the chaos. They wonder why the chaos is there. The chaos shouldn't wonder why they are there. You have to kind of wonder where the water is coming from on that ship, on that boat. It's one of those things where you have to confront the source of your suffering, or you'll never know what will happen. You have to live life. You can't just exist in abstraction and subjectivity. That is the issue. It's as if it's like the point is, it's just an opportunity. Think of it. Think of it, it's a 4 billion-year-old opportunity. A kind of this random science project has been started called civilization. And what do we do? Do we not attend it? Does everybody get rich and go on their hide in their island? Or do we wonder about what is the greater value? Is it power really? Power? I understand power is important, but is power the greatest value? And we see no, it is the freedom of the mind of the creature on this pebble in a light beam to be able to allow the unknown to inspire it as much as the known, and no longer paint stories of chaos or disorder. It's as if when I sometimes like speech is a very, the ancient Greeks acknowledged it the best. They shouldn't just teach what the ancient Greeks said, they should teach how the ancient Greeks spoke. How they spoke was very different than what they said. That means a word can be said in many ways in accordance to how you bring it about, how you allow the communication to occur. And so I find it's kind of like you reach a certain point, you can't go any further, you stop. Then you re envision, literally, you look around and then you continue again. And so, what it is rather than having too much of a future thought of self, to limit the behavior and kind of solidify the sense of self, it becomes more dynamic in accordance that it's also okay if there was no meaning, and it's also okay if there is meaning. But what is beyond more important than truth and the illusion is efficiency of all these literally travelers on this planet. We are traveling in time. That means we've somehow, believe it or not, maybe we are in playfully one can say we are in a time machine right now. You know, that time is this kind of very long thing, kind of how Richard Dawkins said it's like literally kind of nail dust of, I don't know, sawdust or something of a nail. That's how the speck of time we are, the kind of like, that's how big, how old the universe is. You know, I pretty much feel it's countless, but sure, like it's very, we can see a very old universe here. It's like, why do I, it's like at some point I'm like, oh my God, am I just celebrating my own birthday? Why don't I celebrate the birthday of the universe? And I realize, oh my God, the birthday of the universe is every day. Every day, and the energies of the moment appear, not appear, but they move as a self. So it's kind of like you can hold the weapon or you cannot. You can choose to have a mind or you can choose to be mindless. And when you're mindless too much, you become kind of taken by the programs of nature. That means it wasn't that they said like the renunciation was a kind of bad marketing they had about desire. You know, even though Buddha said you must kind of like stop your desire to see something beyond it. But the reason was also because desire was leading to the animalistic loop of a program, the mindless animal, kind of just this like billiard ball just going endlessly hitting the walls, meaninglessly, meaninglessly, until one day it stops. And then it is reset into a new kind of design of evolution. So we are creatures that are constantly resetting. That's another way of saying evolution, you know. It's as if the ultimate renunciation was escape from not just only a savage loop, but that the purpose of design, especially in a universe that changes the dynamism of it going forward, you can never go forward without changing. You can never live without the existential value changing than from the moment it was before. This is why, for me, it doesn't matter kind of what happens like throughout the day. It is the moment of design, as if I have walked in an art gallery and only once I am seeing how that moment was. Who are we living for? And it's no longer a who, it's the human vision. It is how the Homo sapien has to also put down its name at some point and become something else. It's all interpretations of change, I'm telling you. It's on some level, when there's multidimensionality, that means nothing in one dimension is only the truth. What it is it's like you've cut up the pieces, a cake into a bunch of pieces, and then you're saying like no one piece of cake can be the whole cake, but at the same time it's made of the same. Imagine it was just a pure chocolate cake. It's as if that cake piece is still chocolate. Do you know what I mean? Like but it's not the whole cake. So we are, in some sense, we are made of the universe, but we are not the universe. We're in it, we say to ourselves. And so when there's no longer 1,000 tears for a world that was never here, pretty much you no longer cry for the extinction of your species. Sometimes when I know a storm is coming, I sit down and I just kind of close my eyes, you know? And when I close my eyes, I wonder about how the moment will move next and what is. I wonder, I check my own resources. What that means is I wonder about how, um, if the valve was open, how it is being poured into the cup, how the mind is animating the objective phenomena and has even made subjective conclusions of self only to realize the self and the world are codependent. Therefore, the witness of both is the instantaneous, and the instantaneous is beyond the language threshold because language is a dualistic technology. And so the inner technologies, they are animated, they are fragmented. You can visualize as much as you want anything. Just like that was the point, like concentration. Just look at one thing and you'll notice your mind is throwing various ideas at it. It's kind of reopening the moment in various ways. It's as if ideas are kind of like a film strip, and you cut the old school film strip, and you have just one strip of film. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. At some point, silence devours time because it devours what was considering time. When Plato says time is the moving image of eternity, what he means is that time is not forming man, man is forming time. On some level, it's just all elemental change in an empty room. How can you give it a line of time? But at the same time, if you become personalities, of course, time and space are important to consider. The dimensional shift, the subjective dimensional shift. So what it is eventually you will try some things in this life. And then after trying them, you must come to a contentment, and you must learn to stand in the silence in the solitude of the cosmos. At least that is one thing I can share. That the most crucial thing was that there were certain moments of they weren't I couldn't even consider them as failure. It was worse than failure. It was an eradication of the conceptual, literally what my attention was giving energy to. I couldn't any longer. It's as if regardless of my free will, because I'm like on this planet, the planet's like nature is here first. I'm a guest of nature as a sort of animated mind. That for the like that's the advancement, that's the evolutionary leap, that we're no longer just objects that are trying to consider subjects. We're subjects that are looking at objects and constantly seeing an infinitude of an ability to self-replicate the subject. What that means is this is the simplest thing in when you kind of try to study your cellular planes of imagination and abstraction. One of the most simple things is that you look at an object, any object, and your mind can visualize a version of a copy pasted version of that object on the side of the table beside the object, even though that copy pasted object you were envisioning, you know? Like what I mean is that visualized kind of copy of that same object beside itself. That's a simple way of like kind of getting acquainted with your subtler planes, with your imagination, which at some point you're going to discover that it's like the unknown is here too, you know. If you have too many desires, the unknown will freak you out. If you want still things from this world, and if you still want, I don't want to say like, if you this is why it was karma had to do with how the personality opened its eyes. The mind can simulate like your thoughts are occurring in a subjective, not just an objective reality, but in their own subjective reality. Your mind became the world, then it became you. And when you realize this, you'll feel like the yogis did. It was kind of adorable. They're like, "Oh, we got access to the Akashic records." It's like, nobody. The Akashic records got access to you. You are not you, you know? You are the moment. And the moment has an unknown honor. You have to just unknown how you have to just honor how it is unknown. That's what kind of comes from this acknowledgement that it doesn't. You don't need to constantly have subjective design. Sometimes the space is also worth wondering about. That means observe then act in your inner reality when you're consciously navigating. Now, you can say complex ways that the subtler planes, one's imagination can move, is that you imagine, for example, an object in your hand. Just look at any object around you and just hold it. Now, I want you to imagine you look at this object and you see, okay, this is made of atoms, you know, this is made of particles. Now, I want you to also see that the same way you can see a sort of atomic, the halls of lattice, you know, kind of in this object. Now I want you to see that you can also see it as pure geometry. So in some sense, the mind attempts to move geometrically. Now, geometry for me personally, this is something like Mr. Within would say. Geometry is the next great language of all languages. The mind is, there was a military saying that they said you must serve before you can command. So at some point you will open up to the reverence of how the moment is animate, and kind of how the Italian word for soul is anima, anima. And we look at ourselves and we're saying we're animals, you know. We have an L. So we are conscious moments of design, able to wield any design. The greatest freedom is one that was there from the beginning. That is the whole mystical journey. You're returning. It's a circle. You leap into the supernatural. You want to even make the supernatural into a kind of secret story that you're looking for. Then you want to pull unknown strings. You know, and that's kind of like, it's a bit eternally, for an eternal being, it's a bit childish, you know. What I mean by not an eternal being, let me say it in a more smoother way. For an eternal space, that is a very kind of, You see, some actions they add value, some actions they don't, and some actions take value. And this is pretty much the way structured reality works. You know, manifest reality comes and goes. You know, this is why Shiro Onamarshi says, "Let go let go, let." Oh my God, what does he say? He says, "Let come what comes, let go what goes, see what remains." And that seeing what remains is the sight. You're pretty much seeing your, like, your consciousness is like the flame of the candle, and the flame of the candle somehow is looking outside and noticing all the shadows it's creating, and it's wondering where these shadows coming from, and coming back to how it's a flame, right? How it's a sort of subtler expression of a unique energy. That means um, we I find intelligence is, at some point, it has to do with, like, think about it right now. Why are so many people drawn to athletes and sports? Like, for me, when I was growing up, I loved soccer, like, football, and it was one of those things that, like, I remember me, my brother, and my cousins, and every kid in the apartment building that I was in, we would all come down and we'd start just playing in the garage, like making sure not to hit the cars parked in the garage, kind of playing soccer, you know. And so, like, I remember at that time, it was for me, it was the ability of the being was had become a definer of my psychological position. It's as if it was fascinating when someone could do something that I couldn't do, you know? And so, because it challenged me, and so there are unhealthy challenges and there are healthy challenges. And if you find yourself in an honest moment, in a moment you can trust, the challenges are at most, usually healthy, you know, like they cannot be unhealthy, you know. Either you move the world or the world moves you. And when you come into harmony with both, chaos and order, the wings of the bird, they are no longer the reason. They are no longer the context builders of the human story. And so, what can man do? There's an empty canvas here. We just have to throw paint on it. We have to somehow wonder about civilization's next efficient step, rather than having tears, 1,000 tears for a world that was never here. There will come a time of transition, but we have to care how much we want to be a mind. I remember seeing this YouTube video where it was on this kind of news show, and the person was asked, like, they had this conversation about, like, the person who was about to die, and kind of like who believed in God suddenly, you know. And so one person in the news kind of count, like, on the stage, suddenly said, like, they were all sitting at a table, you know. And the guy said, it's like, to be honest, that's a perfectly reasonable choice at that point. The guy, like, that was incredibly hilarious, you know. And I kind of noticed that we hide the self when the moment cannot be in conscious control. And if our conscious control is defined subjectively, then egos will fight like savage beasts. So what that means is our bodies stopped being, like, we physically stop being savage, but we're still subjectively very savage. And what is the value of that savageness? On some level, of course, when chaos is as much of a citizen of the human civilization as order is. But the issue is what is the value? What is the long-term influence of the behavior of human beings that's being based on where their attention goes to? And so, what if 8 billion people are? It's not, we shouldn't just see, oh my God, overpopulation, what do we do? Instead of just seeing that, maybe we should see that there's 8 billion minds that endlessly generate value once they are humble and honest with God. We are 8 billion minds, not just 8 billion bodies. We are creatures that have vision. And this vision, the point of it is that once internal vision is externalized, it's as if you have managed to get a unique pattern into the veins of the external reality. That means at times it's like every action is being witnessed by the whole cosmos as the wave experiences the whole ocean. The wave can choose to be like, yo, I'm a wave separate from the ocean. Or it can choose to be like, oh my God, I'm not the wave, I'm the ocean being the wave. That would be another way of saying a surfer that is made of water never gets hurt. Imagine like an animation kind of Pixar movie where the surfer is made of water. And once he falls, it's as if he returns. So it doesn't really matter if you are rising in this life or you're falling, if there's ascension, descension, whatever. It's just that the attention, if it leads somewhere, what would it do with it? You see, this is why without trust, you can't even know who you are. So this is the true independence of the psychological disposition of the person. A return to the witness prior to language. Before you learned words, before you learned anything, you were a moment of being. You were just being in the moment. You were just present. It's as if you had no. It's like, of course, I'm not saying that in yoga they spoke about two types of virtue. The virtue of the innocence of the child that doesn't know anything yet. And the virtue of the one who had the veteran. You know, and the virtue of the veteran was after a very complex and chaotic journey. They had concluded that order was the way. How you treat the world in front of your eyes will suggest how you feel about yourself. And how you feel about yourself is very key because it holds the point of reference for your whole intelligence. Aldous Huxley has this quote where he says there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. These doors of perception are still there, guys. We just have to open it. We have to care for a world that took 4 billion years to get here. And how we care is we have two options. Either we change the whole system or we create a new system where the old system wants to change to it. You see? It's as if every scholar has built their own boat towards the truth that they sought. The questions they wanted answered were also of their own creation. It's as if somebody doubting and then somebody wondering who is doubting and wondering how the moment brings about phenomenon. When the cosmos becomes your body, your mind will become the unknown sky that holds the cosmos. Once life trusts you, it's kind of like the only way to live for life is to actually live for life. A personal sort of return to the ultimate. And you got to build your own road when you are working internally, you know? That's somewhere where no person can come with you. No person has your eyes, therefore no person can see. No person can truly see who you are to yourself. And also, even if they could see, it's changing a lot of the time. So even what they saw wouldn't be that. Imagine meeting like a distant relative and then constant, like after many years, meeting them again and kind of noticing, like 100%, this is a different person right now. So you see, you don't hold the hold you don't hold the world in your past by through a past image. This is why I say you're not a thought, but you can evoke thought. You can use it. You can take out the sword and shield at any time. You can wonder about the offensive free will, and you can wonder about the defensive divine will. A thousand tears for a world that was never here also means that there were never any tears. As language breaks, direct experiences beams through. Your experience is more important than any idea. And I hope at most my words are being a mirror. That means you realize how your eyes are open. Because what else can we do? Like civilization, it's like this is the chess game. This is the chess game that's in front of us. We either play it or we don't. And if we don't play it, there will be children born who will come and play it. But at the same time, you must use, because you could bring maybe your ancestors lived so long so that you could see the world and do something about it, huh? You know. The marriage of freedom and discipline leads to efficient vision. Freedom means as much as external reality is giving you freedom, you must give external reality freedom too. That means not disturbing nature. That's like something so important to rediscovering the value of your intuition. That means if you don't care for the world, then why do you even wonder about it? Why do you even live in it? So you see, that care is, it's like there's a care, and the major K is the care is the heartbeat, because your heart is working nonstop. Man's vision is not just hopeful; it marches through. The pilot navigates at night, at day, through storms, through clear skies, navigates through internal issues, for example, problems inside the plane and problems outside of the plane. And of course, my whole thing is like this is the pilots of consciousness, as Mr. Within would say, they are, think of it also as an airplane. This is why for me, like hopefully one day I can be, you know, a man can hope, guys. We pilot through chaos and order endlessly to discover how hard the mind and the heart are working. Efforts will be made, some seen, some unseen, some that could be seen and some that never could. So many senses of various moments where I saw myself as a certain self, they crumbled. It was literally I slept and woke up and I felt different. Because I felt different, I was a different person to myself. The moment had its own uniqueness about it, kind of realization that enjoy the past as when it happened. That's when the joy must have been extracted. It's kind of like, how do you walk on thin ice? Either you attempt it or you don't. And on some sense, imagine somebody thinking concrete, that concrete street is made of thin ice. Imagine the child thinking that concrete is lava, right? A lot of children play that game, you know. So when the child thinks like that, you know, it's as if imagine the child never stepping on the street because of what it thinks will happen. And if you are prevented of living because of what you think that will happen, that is not a good enough reason, but it's an important feedback to consider. That means it's like kind of how Sogyal Rinpoche, this Tibetan Buddhist sage, he said, Unless you conquer anger, your enemies will be inexhaustible. Unless you stare truly at what you are, you will not trust what you think you are only. If I considered of myself a thought, if I consider right now that I was a thought, that would mean, do you know how many different thoughts have come and gone since my childhood till now? It would as if be I would have lived and died all those moments. Lived and died in all those moments is that subjective self. So the moment I think I'm a thought, oh my God, what is like how many it's as if it's eventually unspeakable. What can you say? It has changed at a speed where time and space are irrelevant. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And of course, as always, listen to what I say playfully. At times, I'm just attempting to draw a painting on a canvas with the things I say. So, anyways, guys, thanks. Much blessings and namaste.